All right. Ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Boyd said, my name is Craig Morgan. I'm the Chief Prosecutor for the City of Akron. I've been with the City of Akron for 25 years now. And what I wanted to talk about is what is grand jury. We're hearing these words, and so this is really just meant to be, I'm not an expert. It's really more meant to just be sort of civics 101. What does a grand jury do? How does it relate with our criminal justice system? I think first and foremost, it's easy to say that the grand jury is different from what is called a trial jury or what is referred to as a petit jury. A trial jury or a petit jury is what we're used to seeing in news media and through entertainment, right? It's a group of people sitting in a courtroom. There's a judge, there's a defense attorney, there's a prosecutor, there's witnesses called, and then the jurors listen to all the evidence and ultimately make a decision whether somebody is guilty or not guilty. That's a trial jury or a petit jury. It's just what we're more used to and what we see more frequently. But at the beginning of the process in the criminal justice system for felonies is what's called a grand jury, okay? And what the grand jury does is the formalization of felony offenses in the state of Ohio. So cases or matters can go before the grand jury through sort of two different paths. It can go there by way of a provisional complaint filed by a police officer, and that's for all felonies filed by police officers throughout the state. And then eventually that matter has to go before a grand jury, and a grand jury makes a determination as to whether or not whether there was probable cause to believe somebody committed a crime. And if they find that, then it turns into what we call an indictment, and that's the formalization of felony charges. But also, what people are less familiar with is matters can just be presented directly to a grand jury. They don't have to come through a provisional complaint filed by police officers. A matter, particularly one that is voluminous in evidence or has a lot of witnesses or will take a lot of time to present or has complex legal issues, matters such as that can be presented directly to a grand jury. So what happens through a grand jury? As I said, the grand jury isn't like the trial jury. They don't find somebody guilty or not guilty. They just decide whether or not there was probable cause to indict a person. And what is probable cause? Probable cause is enough facts to believe a particular person committed a particular offense. That's what probable cause is. There's different standards of proof in the law. There's reasonable suspicion, probable cause, and proof beyond a reasonable doubt. I think probably everybody's heard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt before. That's what a trial jury has to find before they find somebody guilty of a crime. But as I said, the grand jurors deal with a much lower standard, and that's probable cause. Now, the grand jury, as I said, is the beginning of the process. It's not the end. So what happens? And again, I can't comment specifically about how some other agency, that being the Attorney General's office, is going to prosecute a matter. I'm just going to kind of give you a generic, brief overview. A lot of summonses go out, and people get summons to come in, and they say, you're now a potential grand juror. Now, how do you end up becoming a potential grand juror? Well, you gotta live in Summit County. You got to be at least 18 years old of age, and you have to be a registered voter. And so it works a lot like a lottery system, and that's how all jury system works. So if you're qualified to sit as a grand juror, you could receive a summons. And I can't tell you how many potential people they'll ask for, but they'll bring a bunch of people in, and then they'll do a selection process. Now, this is different again from a trial or a petit jury. Grand jury is run strictly by the prosecutor. And again, in reference to the matter of Mr. Walker's case, that's going to be a representative from the Attorney General's office. As many of you know in this room, this investigation was turned over to the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, and a representative from the Attorney General's office from the state of Ohio is going to be handling this matter. So the way a grand jury is selected is the prosecutor will ask them a series of questions. And that's meant to sort of make sure that there's no bias, and they want to make sure that they try to impanel the most impartial grand jury that they possibly can. Now, the grand jury is usually comprised of 12 to 14 people. 9 people will hear a matter, but often you want to have some alternates, right? You want to have 3 to 5 alternates, particularly with a large, complex investigation. And the reason for that being, if a matter is going to take a week or 2 weeks to present because of the volume of evidence, halfway through, you don't want to lose somebody because they have a family emergency or they become ill. You want to make sure that you have enough people that can hear the entire matter. The grand jurors, as I said, 9 usually hear the matter, but it's not, unlike a trial jury, it's not a unanimous verdict, right? It requires 7 of 9 people to make a determination that probable cause exists. There's a couple of terms of art that can come out during the course of a grand jury. So ultimately, grand jurors could conclude that there was probable cause to believe somebody committed a crime, and if they choose to indict that person, that's called a true bill. And then another thing that you might hear is if ultimately 7 of 9 can't reach a decision, believing that there was probable cause to charge somebody with a crime, it's called a no bill. So there's a couple terms that you might hear moving forward. Other things about the grand jury that's a little bit different, and again, I can't speak directly towards how somebody may present a particular case, but I can say in general, it's a little less formal than a trial jury. In a trial jury, it's very formalized about how the evidence reaches the jurors. Jurors really aren't able to ask a lot of questions. If they are able to ask questions, it's very structured. Grand jury is a little bit different. It can be a little bit more personable. The jurors can ask questions of the witnesses. What would you expect to be, what would you expect to have presented at a grand jury? You'd expect to see witnesses testify. Those could be eyewitnesses to a scene. Those could be investigating officers. They could be experts, forensic experts. You could have any type of other digital evidence, such as video, cellular phone communications. All of that stuff is the type of evidence that could be heard in front of a grand jury. And after the grand jurors hear all that evidence, generally the prosecutor will apprise them of the laws that are applicable to the particular situation. They'll give them all the information that they can, and then they'll take a vote on various offenses, okay? I can tell you from everything I know in this matter that all 8 officers are being presented to the grand jury, and that could, I can't even say what kind of result that could end up being. It could be 8 officers are indicted and charged. It could be our 8 officers are acquitted. Not acquitted, but no billed and not charged. Or it could be a mix. It could be 2 officers are charged and 6 are not, or 6 are charged and 2 are not. So the important part is all 8 officers are going to be presented to the grand jury by the representative of the Attorney General's office. How that ends up coming out, I don't know, because I haven't been involved in the process. Another thing that has come up, we've obviously had a lot of these conversations, and people have asked me, every time I've had this discussion, people have asked me about the demographic makeup of the grand jury. I will tell you this, when they make the summonses, that's not part of the conversation, okay? It is a random lottery. There's no way to control that. It's going to be controlled by Summit County's population, right? So in the city of Akron, we have a 30% African American community, but when you get into Summit County, you get closer to 15%. I think that's an important part of the conversation, just to make sure everybody knows the demographics involved of what this grand jury could look like. So, that being said, Civics 101, questions about the grand jury process?
Those people, don't they have to be registered voters?
That is correct, yes. The question was, do the people sitting for the grand jury have to be registered voters? And the answer is, they have to be registered in order to receive a summons, right? If you're not registered to vote, then you won't receive a summons to come in. There are a lot of ancillary things that can come out of tragedy, right? One is a conversation about increasing voter registration. You're never going to have me, or quite frankly, many other people discourage voter registration. I think that's one thing that people can take away in some small part from any of these conversations is we need to increase voter registration, because if you're not registered to vote, you're not going to have a chance to be involved. Yeah, that's a very good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that the process is normally conducted by the prosecutor, in this case, that's the Ohio Attorney General.
Yes.
Is it just that individual that is then selecting the members of the grand jury as an individual, or is it collectively amongst people in the Attorney General's office, in addition to the Attorney General, that is actually selecting the members?
I can't speak for them specifically. Certainly, it could be as few as one, or if that person, it's not uncommon to have a coworker, by your side helping you out. I can't speak specifically for this incident. I can tell you, but that's an excellent point, because I forgot something. Unlike a trial jury, the defense has no presence. So in other words, when a trial jury is selected, as we're familiar with, we've seen on TV, the prosecutor gets to ask some questions, the defense attorney gets to ask some questions, and then each side gets to whittle that down and create the jury that they're looking for. This is a much different process. The defense attorney doesn't have a presence in the room when the grand jury is being selected, or when information is being presented to the grand jury.
How many voters were summoned to this particular grand jury?
The question was how many voters were summoned. I don't have the answer to that.
Would it be over maybe 10, 100, maybe 100?
I would suggest over 100, yes. But yeah, I would suggest a large volume, as we frequently do with complex matters, even on the trial side. You want to make sure you have a lot of people, because you never know how many people there will be people that show up, this one I can say without a doubt, there will be people that show up and say, I just can't sit here. I can't sit here, it's too much, and I just won't feel comfortable. And so, that you want to make sure you have a lot of people to get through.
So, you said that the defense attorney was present in the room when they do that. Will do the officers have an opportunity to speak or not?
That's an excellent question. The question was, though defense attorneys are not present in the room during the time grand jury is hearing testimony, would the officers in this case, or in general, a defendant, have an opportunity to testify? And the answer is yes. The answer is yes. It is also not completely uncommon, okay? So it's, again, let's step out of this case for a second, and let's say that a prosecutor was really interested in hearing a defendant's version of the facts of a particular case. Now, when that person goes in to testify, they leave their attorney behind, right? So they're in there, it's them and the prosecutor. But yes, very good question. Defendants can testify if the prosecutor chooses to do so.
Can he refuse if the prosecutor calls him in? Can he refuse to do that?
Another excellent question. The question is, can a defendant refuse to testify? In the United States of America, absolutely any defendant in any criminal proceeding can exercise their right to remain silent. So that, yeah, absolutely.
When would a decision be made about whether or not the grand jury would be sequestered or not?
I couldn't tell you, Ms. Morgan. That would be up to the Attorney General. It's an excellent question. The question is whether the grand jury will be sequestered, and I just don't know because I'm not running the program.
Is the process open to the public, and how long would you think it would take? 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks?
That is a very good question. The question is the process open to the public? And then the follow-up is about how long. There's going to be some variables in here. I'm not going to be able to give the best answer. But I can give an answer to the first. The grand jury is unlike the trial jury in that the proceedings are confidential. And that is done to protect the identity of the grand jurors. In other words, to make sure that they come out with the clearest decision on what happened in a particular incident. And that's whether to no-bill somebody or true-bill somebody, right? You don't want their identities out there. Now, certainly after the whole process is open, I'm sure you've all seen on the news, sometimes grand jurors end up doing interviews, right? That's up to them. But during the initial process, that remains confidential. Now, your follow-up, which is a very good point, how long? I'm not speaking out of turn because the Attorney General, Mr. Ghost, has stated that this, in the paper, that it could take about a week. How long it takes to deliberate and make a decision, that's a tough part. I'll be honest. My gut tells me probably won't get a lot of notice. We'll probably know something, we'll probably have, 24 hours notice, and that might be a lot, right? So once a decision is actually, once they actually come to a decision, how quickly we find out about it, it's probably going to be pretty fast. But how long it takes them to deliberate, I wouldn't be able to tell you. I think what anybody wants in any jury process, whether it's the end or the beginning, I think we can all we can ever ask is that the jurors take their time, take in all that information, and deliberate and have conversations amongst themselves and come up with the best and most appropriate decision possible. Yes, sir.
Why does it appear that because there were 8 officers involved, that this process has taken so long to get to where we are today? And just listening to you, I understand because it's not in your office. There still seems to be a lot of I don't know. So how does it get this far and you don't seem to know anything? We've all seen what we've seen as far as the videos that were initially, we saw how the shooting and all of that appeared from what we were shown. How does it take this long to charge someone?
That is an excellent question. The question is, why are we here 8 months later? And the answer is, and yeah, there is a lot of I don't knows, but part of the I don't knows is we haven't been involved. The answer is our chief made a decision the night of this incident to release jurisdiction of this event to the Ohio Attorney General. And when he made that decision, which I completely endorse, one of the things that has come out of this is moving to an independent, full, thorough, fair, and complete investigation. And for years, obviously, as many of you know, Akron Police, as with many communities, they used to investigate their own incidents, right? But when he made that decision the night of this incident, we lost jurisdiction of this incident, and it was solely in the hands of the Attorney General's office. Again, the Attorney Generals have there's 2 arms. The Bureau of Criminal Investigation is their investigative arm, and then the Attorney General's office, they're prosecutors, much like me. They're the ones that review and present the matter. So I don't know, it doesn't sound great coming from me, but the reason it has taken so long is because we made that decision to not investigate this case, and it's been with somebody else. And once we say, we can't give something to somebody and then take it back and say we have to do it now. No, we let them complete the process. So I hope that helps.
Craig, can I just add
Absolutely.
one other thing?
Hold the mic. Hey, do me a favor. Hold the mic a little bit closer because we are streaming.
Here? Yeah. Okay. So I can tell you since I've been here, the average time period for an investigation is between 8 and 14 months. It's not uncommon. Actually, this investigation, while I know it seems like it's been taking a long time, it has been an average time period when you look at other shootings. Actually, I'm always very honest, but it's a saying to be totally upfront and honest with you. I was expecting this to take a little bit longer because there were so many officers involved. But while it seems like this is a long period of time, they are digging through a ton of evidence, they're interviewing people, and they're doing their thing, right? To hopefully present to the grand jury a complete picture of what happened based on facts and evidence.
So just a small rebuttal. Is it clear? Are you saying that you single-handedly made the decision for the investigation to be handled outside, or was that, because I've heard some different things, and I want to make sure that I'm hearing correctly.
It was my decision to go outside. And what I said when I interviewed for this job, when Kemp was moderating it, is I believe it's best practice, if your agency is involved in a shooting, that you should go outside the organization. I got here and we started moving in that direction. Now there's negotiation that needs to go on with the union and other things, but this one, there was no way we were going to investigate this. The Akron Police Department was not going to investigate this. So that's the reason we went outside.
Chief, while you still have the mic, are you able to explain in regards to you stating that they will have to justify for every bullet that left the chamber? So in regards to the BCI investigation, that will be indeed done?
Every decision the officers made is going to be examined and scrutinized. My belief, anyway, and that they are going to have to explain why every bullet went down the barrel of their gun, as is in every officer involved shooting. If I'm involved in shooting, I'm going to have to explain what threat I saw, why I continue to shoot. So that is pretty standard in any investigation, and I believe and I'm hopeful that that's going to be very specific in this investigation.
I just wanted to know, being that you stated that, so are you making sure that that is indeed being done?
So I can't, we've walled ourselves off from this investigation. In order for this investigation to be independent, I cut our interaction with BCI off. The only thing we were doing is facilitating, getting paperwork, or setting up interviews if they needed assistance. Other than that, I don't know anything about the facts and evidence they gathered. I have not been talking to the prosecutor. I'm not going to know until we all know, and then when the investigation is released, because I haven't seen the investigative report yet either. So, and again, the whole thing here is it's independent, outside of influence from anybody inside the police department. Again, the reason this is done is to ensure that in the community, this investigation will have more credibility than if the host agency or the agency that's involved actually does the investigation.
I have a problem. You guys need to remove complete from this little investigation and grand jury thing you got going on. You recognize the purple camouflage? That's right. My husband was killed by you two of you. Okay? Grand jury is a farce, Akron. They're pulling the wool over your eyes. I know what grand jury is all about. I've been through it. My husband, Muhammad, was killed by these folks over here. Okay? Ball was the chief then. He stepped down shortly after they killed my Muhammad. And I'm here to tell you that when they're standing up there lying to you all, saying complete, let me tell you how complete Muhammad's grand jury was. The eyewitness that saw my Muhammad running for his life and has stood to this day in front of the press and said that Muhammad never posed a threat, that Muhammad never pulled a gun, he never saw a gun, and he saw him being shot in the back and falling face down. Do you want to know how complete Muhammad's grand jury was? That eyewitness that testified to all of that in the press, which never got aired, which the Beacon Journal never ran the story because these fools made him bury it. He was never called to testify in front of my Muhammad's grand jury. The eyewitness that saw all this. So take back your words. See, look at them over there. They're working it out. They're working it out. And that man there in the suit threatened me with charges. Because after the grand jury, I put those two officers that killed my Muhammad's faces up on my Facebook page.
Okay.
And I
Ms.
got
Vaughn.
threatened with charges.
Ms. Vaughn.
Don't let them fool you. Please, Akron.
And Ms.
And you
Vaughn.
know what? It doesn't matter, because no matter what comes out of this grand jury, it's going to be hell for you all. Why? Because if they clear all these officers, you know what you've got coming, and if they put all these officers under criminal charges, then you're gonna have to hand one over to the stolen lives. Justice for Jayland, justice for Mohammed, justice for Omar, justice for all. Don't be over there shaking your head at me, Madam President.
Everybody's here to talk about something, and I just
I've
wanted.
said all I had to say. I think people got the message.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
All right. No, you don't.
Going back to the topic in question, does anybody have any more questions about, yes, sir?
So can you talk more about the grand jury selection? You did say that you have to be a registered voter, you have to live in Summit County. But are there any things that can eliminate a candidate from being?
Well, there's a variety of things. For instance, if somebody's just going to have when you select a jury, you want it to be as impartial and fair as possible, right? So in other words, somebody might receive a summons and they might be the husband or wife of a police officer. And I'm not even saying a police officer in the city of Akron, I'm saying a police officer or a law enforcement officer. And then it's natural that that person might have some bias. And so that's the type of thing that might cause somebody to say, I think this person should be excused. Doesn't make them a bad person. Doesn't mean that they wouldn't ultimately probably do a good job. It's just you want to have the most fair and impartial jury as possible. So that's certainly something that could get somebody removed. Some form of really personal bias or a lack of transparency that might cause somebody to, it might skew their ability to say. And plus, quite frankly, when people, timing is never good for a lot of people. And if you get a grand jury summons, but you are spending your days taking care of your elderly father, and you're not going to be able to be present there. So if you express that type of thing, a prosecutor might excuse you